Found out my wife and best friend were having an affair for years. They ran off together, and now they're back asking for forgiveness after going bankrupt. It all started 5 years ago. I had been married to my wife Sarah for 10 wonderful years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we were always able to work through issues and come out stronger. Sarah was the love of my life, my best friend, my everything. Or so I thought. One day, I came home early from work to surprise Sarah. When I walked in the door, I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see. There was Sarah, tangled up on the couch with my best friend of over 15 years, Mike. They immediately jumped apart, clothes disheveled, faces flushed. The look of sheer terror on their faces said it all. I stood there in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity. The anger, hurt, and betrayal washed over me in waves. How could they do this to me? Sarah was the one person I trusted more than anyone, and Mike was supposed to be my closest friend. How long has this been going on? I finally managed to choke out. They both just sat there, unable to meet my gaze. Finally, Sarah spoke up in a small, trembling voice. It's been about 2 years. 2 years. They had been betraying me and lying to my face for 2 entire years. All the family dinners, the nights out with friends, the vacations we took, it was all a facade. The very foundation of my life had been built on lies and deception. I don't even remember what happened next. I know I yelled, I cried, I threw things. At some point, they both left, slinking away in shame. I was utterly devastated. My heart felt like it had been ripped to shreds. In the days and weeks that followed, I was a mess. I could barely function at work, I stopped returning calls from friends and family, and I definitely stopped eating and sleeping properly. The pain was all-consuming. How could I ever trust anyone again? Eventually, the initial shock wore off a bit and I was able to start picking up the pieces. I filed for divorce from Sarah, and I never wanted to see her or Mike again. I cut them both out of my life completely. It was the only way I could even begin to heal. Fast forward 3 years. I had thrown myself into my work, poured my energy into hobbies and interests, and even started dating again. Things were finally starting to feel normal. I was beginning to feel whole again. And then one day, out of the blue, I got a call from Sarah. She was begging me to meet with her and Mike. At first, I refused. I had no desire to ever see their faces again. But there was something in her voice, a desperation that I had never heard before, that made me reconsider. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them. When I walked into the coffee shop and saw them sitting there, my heart started racing. The wound still felt so fresh, even after all this time. They both looked like complete wrecks. Sarah had dark circles under her eyes and her clothes hung off her frame. Mike looked like he had aged 10 years. They both started apologizing profusely the moment I sat down. We're so sorry, they kept repeating. We made the biggest mistake of our lives and we've regretted it every single day since. I sat there in stony silence, letting them pour their hearts out. Part of me felt a sick sense of satisfaction seeing them suffer. But another part of me, the part that still cared for them both despite everything, just felt weary. Finally, I spoke up. Why are you here? What do you want from me? Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath. We're in trouble, Op. We've made a mess of our lives and we have nowhere else to turn. We lost everything, our jobs, our house, our savings. We're completely broke and we have no one else to turn to. So you think you can just come crawling back here, expecting me to forgive and forget? I scoffed. Do you have any idea how much pain you two have caused me? We know, Mike interjected, his voice cracking. And we're so sorry. We made the biggest mistake of our lives and we've paid dearly for it. Please, Op, we have nowhere else to go. We're begging you, from the bottom of our hearts, to help us. I sat there, stunned. Part of me wanted to tell them both to go to hell. They had obliterated my trust, shattered my heart, and destroyed my life. Why should I ever help them? But then I looked at them, really looked. They were broken, desperate shells of their former selves. And as much as I hated to admit it, some part of me still cared about them. I just couldn't shut that part off, no matter how much I wanted to. What do you expect me to do? I asked wearily. Take you both in, play happy family? After everything that's happened? No, of course not, Sarah said hurriedly. We're not asking for that. We need a place to stay, just temporarily, until we can get back on our feet. And maybe someday, if you can find it in your heart, we could try to rebuild a friendship. But we understand if that's too much to ask. I stared at them for a long moment, my mind racing. Every fiber of my being was telling me to walk away, to leave them to fend for themselves. They had made their bed, now they could lie in it. But those damn caring feelings just wouldn't go away. As much as I hated them for what they'd done, I still couldn't bear to see them suffering. And a small, treacherous part of me was curious to know what had become of them in the years since. "All right," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You can stay with me. Temporarily. But I swear, if either of you so much as look at me wrong, you're out." The relief that washed over their faces was palpable. "Thank you, Op, thank you so much," Sarah said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We won't let you down, we promise." I just nodded, already regretting my decision. What the hell was I getting myself into? Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Mike moved into my spare bedroom. It was beyond awkward, to say the least. We mostly avoided each other, only interacting when absolutely necessary. I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. As I watched them slink around my house, I found myself analyzing their every move, looking for signs that they were up to no good. Could I really trust them, after everything that had happened? Or was I just setting myself up to be betrayed again? To their credit, Sarah and Mike did seem genuinely remorseful. They never asked me for anything beyond a roof over their heads, and they kept to themselves for the most part. Still, I found it hard to let my guard down. The wounds were still too fresh. One night, about a month into their stay, I came home to find Sarah sitting alone in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. I sighed and sat down across from her, bracing myself. "What is it?" She took a deep, shuddering breath. I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything. I know that doesn't even begin to make up for what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm truly, deeply sorry." I remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to unleash all the anger and hurt I'd been bottling up. But another part of me, the part that still cared, just felt exhausted. "I loved you so much, Op," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I betrayed that love in the worst possible way. I hurt you, I hurt Mike, I hurt everyone. And I have to live with that guilt every single day." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "Mike and I, we lost everything. Our jobs, our home, our savings. We thought we could start over somewhere new, but it all fell apart. We have nothing left." I felt a twinge of something akin to pity. As much as I hated them for what they'd done, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for their situation. They were truly at rock bottom. "I'm not asking you to forgive us," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I know that's too much to ask. I needed you to know how sorry I am. And I needed you to know that we've paid dearly for our mistakes." I sat there in silence for a long moment, processing her words. "I appreciate you saying that," I finally replied. "But it doesn't change what happened. The trust is broken, and I don't know if I can ever get that back." Sarah nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I understand. I had to try. I had to at least attempt to make amends, even if you can never truly forgive us." With that, she stood up and retreated to the spare bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. As much as I hated to admit it, a part of me could understand the weight of the guilt and regret she must be feeling. In the weeks that followed, I started to notice a subtle change in Sarah and Mike's behavior. They seemed more subdued, more introspective. Gone was the furtive glances and nervous energy that had permeated the air when they first arrived. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Mike approached me hesitantly. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I eyed him warily, but nodded. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. I wanted to say how sorry I am. For everything. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." I remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Mike pressed on. "I know that doesn't change anything, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I needed you to know how truly sorry I am. The guilt has been eating me alive." I studied him for a moment, searching his face for any signs of deception. But all I saw was raw, genuine remorse. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "But it doesn't undo what happened." Mike nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I know. I needed you to know how sorry I am. And I wanted you to know that we've paid dearly for our mistakes." With that, he turned and retreated back to the spare bedroom, leaving me once again to process his words. As much as I hated to admit it, a part of me could see the sincerity in his apology. And as much as I wanted to hold on to my anger, I found it slowly starting to dissipate. Over the next few months, I continued to observe Sarah and Mike as they lived under my roof. They kept to themselves, rarely interacting with me beyond basic pleasantries. But I couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in their demeanor. Gone was the furtive, nervous energy that had once surrounded them. In its place was a palpable air of resignation and regret. They carried themselves with a heaviness, a weight that seemed to drag them down. It was clear that they were truly suffering the consequences of their actions. And as much as I hated to admit it, a part of me started to feel a reluctant sense of sympathy for them. They had lost everything, their jobs, their homes, their savings. And they had been forced to come crawling back to the very person they had betrayed, begging for help. One day, as I was cleaning out the spare bedroom, I came across a stack of papers hidden beneath the mattress. Curious, I rifled through them, only to discover that they were job applications and resumes. Dozens of them, all bearing the names of Sarah and Mike. It was clear that they were desperately trying to get their lives back on track, to rebuild from the ashes of their former existence. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of respect for their determination. I continued to observe them over the following weeks, and it became increasingly evident that they were truly making an effort to turn their lives around. They were both applying for jobs, attending job interviews, and even looking into taking classes to update their skills. And as I watched them struggle, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of empathy. They had made a terrible mistake, one that had cost them dearly. But they were trying, against all odds, to pick up the pieces and start anew. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Sarah approached me hesitantly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft. I nodded, bracing myself for another round of apologies or pleas for forgiveness. But what she said next caught me completely off guard. "We're leaving," she said, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Mike and we've both landed jobs in another city. We're going to start over there, try to rebuild our lives." I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me, relief, sadness, even a hint of regret. "I see," I said simply, unsure of how to respond. "We just wanted to thank you," Sarah continued, her eyes finally meeting mine. "For giving us a chance, even after everything we did. It's more than we deserved, and we're grateful for it." I nodded, unsure of what to say. A part of me was relieved that they were finally leaving, that I wouldn't have to face the constant reminders of their betrayal. But another part of me, the part that had somehow managed to find a sliver of empathy, felt a twinge of sadness. "Good luck," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you're able to find the fresh start you're looking for." Sarah gave me a small, wistful smile. "Thank you, for everything." With that, she turned and headed back to the spare bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Over the next few days, I watched as Sarah and Mike packed up their meager belongings and prepared to depart. There was an air of bittersweet melancholy that hung over the house, a palpable sense of closure and finality. On the day of their departure, I found myself standing in the doorway, watching as they loaded their few possessions into a battered old car. They both turned to face me, a mixture of trepidation and gratitude etched on their faces. "Thank you, Mike said, his voice low and sincere. "For everything. We know we don't deserve your kindness, but we're grateful for it all the same." Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Goodbye, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us, someday." I simply nodded, unable to find the words to respond. As they climbed into the car and drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me. Relief, yes, but also a twinge of sadness and regret. In the years that followed, I often found myself thinking about Sarah and Mike, wondering how they were faring in their new lives. A part of me hoped that they had truly found the fresh start they were seeking, that they had managed to rebuild their lives and find some measure of peace. And as time passed, I found myself slowly coming to terms with the events of the past. The wound, though it would never fully heal, had begun to scab over. I had learned to let go of the anger and bitterness, to focus on the present and the future rather than dwelling on the past. Perhaps, in time, I would even find it in my heart to forgive them. It was a long and difficult road, but one that I was determined to walk. For in the end, the only person I was truly hurting by holding on to that anger was myself. So I moved forward, one step at a time, embracing the life that lay ahead of me. And who knows, maybe someday, I would even find the courage to reach out to Sarah and Mike, to see how they were doing and to finally offer the forgiveness they had been seeking.